I want to talk a little bit about what my morality is, because it seems like there's a little bit of confusion as to what exactly I stand for and what I don't stand for. And there's a lot of confusion as to how I can say that there's no right and there's no difference between right and wrong. I want to start out by talking a little bit about a phenomenon that's going on right now in prisons in the United States. One of the things that happens is that we get a criminal, we put him in a court of law. Once we determine that he's guilty, he gets put away in prison. Now, we do have some contingencies as far as whether or not the person is mentally ill, but a lot of times we put them in prison, we tuck them away there, we keep them away from society for a few years, and then we let them back in, and a lot of times we have repeat offenders. I think that that's not really the best way to take care of the situation. I think that a better way to do this, and by better I mean more of a win-win situation, a situation where both sides of this whole situation are happy and feel more fulfilled, and makes all of society move up to a higher, happier overall plane, is to actually try to understand these individuals that go to the prisons. To not just say, well, that person should go there for life without any discussion as far as trying to rehabilitate that person, or trying to understand that person, or trying to figure out how to make this person still a productive member of society. But so not just tuck them away that way, but actually try to see, what happened, what can we do to make this world a better place for them. And the reason why it's a good idea to do that is not just because what they did was wrong, and not just because putting them in prison is wrong, but because we're missing out on some very valuable skills. We're missing out on some very valuable things that these individuals could do. I mean, we spend tons of tax money, tax dollars on keeping these individuals in prison. And it would be a lot more productive for us overall if we took some of those minds and we figured out how to utilize them as opposed to, tuck them away. These are useful human beings, so we should see them as useful human beings as opposed to individuals that need to be separated from the rest of society. I see humanity as, not just, and this is a framework that I see us working in, not just individuals, although we are that too, but also as people who are together in this journey, in this universe. So as long as we're here, we're in a kind of strange sort of way, a bit of a conglomeration of sorts of individuals who are all working towards a common goal. The common goal is to fulfill their individual preferences. I would like my preferences to be fulfilled. You would like your preferences to be fulfilled. If you didn't want your preferences to be fulfilled, they wouldn't be your preferences. So what I think morality is, not only in Christianity, but in the world at large, is this attempt to have these preferences satisfied, which oftentimes requires some compromise. You may really want that. You may prefer to have that piece of bread. Well, I made that piece of bread. I would prefer to be compensated for it. Okay, let's kind of. And I would prefer to not just be compensated for it, but I would prefer to buy candy for my daughter. Okay, let's try to work something out. You work things out of the barter system, and then you get more complicated when it gets into things like money and so on. So, what morality seems to basically be is the negotiation of preferences. And so I think that we should recognize morality as that and move from that base. I think that morality has gotten a little bit messed up. I think that what has happened is that a few people have had preferences and they've universalized them on everybody else. And I know this may be very difficult if you think of the Christian God, or if you think of God or if you think of a certain concept of God as the God, whether it's the Muslim God or the Jewish God or the Christian God. So if you see things in that light, it may be very difficult to understand this concept. But if you try to take a step back from that, and try to look at things from a very drastically different perspective, it's also possible that perhaps God was made up. Let's just take that as a hypothesis. And it's not that hard to take as a hypothesis, because if you believe in the Christian concept of God, if you believe in the Bible and so on, you have to assume that all these other religious gods are just made up. So, and you probably would assume that Zeus may have been made up. So, I know the normal Christian response to this discussion is to say, well, they were all offshoots of God. And to that I say, well, why didn't they just go directly to the Christian God and look into all these other gods? Why did they get the fake as opposed to the real thing? But we'll go ahead and put that to the side right now. Let me give you another hypothesis, and I know I didn't address that one or dismiss it fairly and give it a full hearing, but let me try to give you another hypothesis. Suppose this God was made up. These gods were just made up. Why would people do that? Well, there's this Nietzschean concept where perhaps somebody that was weaker, somebody that was frailer, somebody that was inferior to other people in some way, wants a piece of bread. And they go into the shop and they say to the man, I would like a piece of bread. And the person says, I'm not going to give you a piece of bread. What do you have for me? I don't have anything. Well, get out of my shop. I don't have a piece of bread. Well, you should really care about me because I need my piece of bread. I mean, you should feel for me because I need that piece of bread. Well, who says? Well, it's just the way that things work. Well, who says? I mean, that's not good enough. Well, God says so. And I know you may have heard this before, but this is the way that the concept of a certain God can get created. You take your preferences, and then you have to take these preferences and somehow rule over or somehow dictate the way that somebody more powerful than you, or somebody who may not be as easily controlled by you or as easily influenced by you, have to dictate the way that they're going to act. And just make their actions a little bit more predictable so that you know how to get your preferences and, they know how to get their preferences, and it's a neat little system. Which is why I think people are so sensitive to morality. And these preferences are not just, small preferences, like I would like a Danish as opposed to, I would like a Danish donut as opposed to just a jelly-filled donut or something like that. They're not just small little preferences, but they're like, they can be huge things. Like, I would prefer not to be tortured. I mean, that's just me. I would prefer to be able to go in my bed and sleep without having to worry about somebody coming in and murdering me. So because most of us around here believe in this God that says, thou shalt not kill people in their sleep, I can go and I can sleep in peace. Which is why we are very, very sensitive about morality. Because if I can't trust, because it's this whole system of preferences, if I can't trust you to subscribe to the same system that I have as far as the fulfillment of preferences, then I may be uncomfortable with fulfilling your preferences because you're not part of my system. So there's the guarantees aren't there anymore. So I think this is why morality is so important, and this morality is so crucial. And this is why I care about morality. Selfishness is not normally looked at as a healthy trait in a lot of different ways of thought. But I think selfishness is unavoidable. And I would prefer not to die in my sleep. I would prefer to have good friends. I would prefer to enjoy my life while I'm here. I would prefer to make a mark on the world that gives other people, that fulfills other people's preferences in ways that I feel fulfilled about. These are things that I want. These are things that I pursue. So this is why morality is very important to me, because I want those things. And I also want to be honest, because I want you to accept me for who I am, not for who I pretend to be. So all of these things are very important to me, which is why I care so much about morality. So the way that I think that, but I don't think that individuals are just islands. I think that we're individuals, but I think that we're also part of a larger conglomeration of existence. I think that we don't work just as individuals, but we also work as people working together. If I'm healthy, and my health depends on your health, depends on the next person's health, and so on. If I want to live in a healthy society, I have to realize that I am me and be selfish about myself, but realize also that I'm bigger than myself. This is the classic argument when you're talking to somebody who says, I built this company from the ground up. Well, in order for your trucks to move and get to your distribution centers, they have to go on the publicly paved roads. You depend on your truck drivers to go in and out. You depend on this whole society of individuals to get you to where you are. And so you are not an island in and of yourself. You are part of a conglomeration of existence that gives you this particular life. And I think this is something that we don't just feel that is not just physical. I think that is something that's very existential, which is why love is such a highly valued aspect of our presence here, because it's part of our connection to each other. When we don't see that our part in the way that the universe works is recognized, we tend to get a little resentment. We tend to get a little hurt. We tend to get a little bit angry. And I think that these times where we get angry are not so much opportunities for people to shut us out as they are for opportunities for people to look at them and say, why are you angry? Why are you upset? Why do you feel like you don't belong in this particular why don't you feel like you belong in this world? And be really determined to do that. And there has been so much progress made with the assumption that people want to belong to the world without having their experiences and who they are erased in order for that to happen. And so I think that we can have a much more vibrant, much more fulfilling, much more exciting existence if we can see how to include these individuals into society as opposed to tucking them away, which is why I am so hesitant to define wrong. Because what I'm looking to do is not so much to define and label individuals as much as I am trying to figure out exactly who they are. That being said, I think that there is a certain degree of labeling that may be somewhat useful, and may be somewhat necessary in today's culture and the way it is set up. And I think Christopher Hitchens did this very often. Christopher Hitchens often got nailed down on exactly what his morality was, and a lot of attacks on him were because he didn't really seem to have a clear sense of morality. I think what Christopher Hitchens was trying to do is turn the Christian morality in on itself. So take those vocabulary words like evil and bad and wrong and so on, and show how they are inconsistent, how they are perhaps in some cases unhelpful, how in some cases they may cause suppression of individuals in ways that may be extremely unhealthy, experientially unhealthy, and show them how there may be opportunities for further love for individuals if you genuinely try to understand exactly where they're coming from, as opposed to forcing them in a box. So I think there's two parts of this. One is recognizing the political climate, the political social climate that we're in, and working within that, and working with that, trying to transcend it so that we can get past just the language and the moral codes and laws, even as we critique them and start to recognize the individuals within them, and thus free individuals from them without and keeping that fuzzy enough and keeping that in question enough and keeping that examined enough so that we don't automatically take a certain preference and universalize it. We shouldn't universalize preferences. We shouldn't universalize individual preferences, I think. Although we should be very vocal about exactly who we are. And I use this word should because I think this is the happiest that we can function in society. This is something that's going to be this is a pursuit that's going to be most fulfilling to everyone. And if it's not, and if there's a better system, then I'm open to it. But this is just a hypothesis that I'm putting forth. The question may also come up, who decides? If there's a couple individuals who have a strong disagreement, who decides what happens there? And I think that this is a very delicate situation. I think that, again, going back to, training a dog example, I mean, if a dog is barking and acting up and cutting up, the dog whisperer may come in, maybe you know who I'm talking about. The dog whisperer may come by, and he says, well, what you need to do is you need to show your pet that you really care about him, that you love him, and so on, and try to understand your pet a little bit better. What, are you saying that I should just let him out of the cage? No. I'm not saying you should let him out of the cage. What you're doing right now is keeping you safe. What you're doing right now is separating you and the dog. It's a provisional situation. So perhaps the next step is to try to figure out how to bring you and the dog closer together so that you guys have a stronger relationship. And the mediator would figure out how to exactly make that work, figuring out where the dog's coming from, figuring out where the owner is coming from. Something similar happens with Super Nanny. Really sitting down with the kids, trying to figure out with respect and with understanding exactly where the kid's coming from, and having the kid honestly express his or herself, and the same with the parent, and then trying to figure out a way to make these two match up. And I think that there's a very healthy place for that. But I don't think we should be forced to be mediators. I think that anger is an important part of showing individuals exactly how we feel about a situation. There are some things that can only be communicated with anger and with loud screams, which can also be very effective at getting the point across. And sometimes I think that may be necessary. But I think that experience should be recognized. I think experience should be recognized honestly. But I also think that within this honest expression of experiences, which is, which is part of getting our preferences recognized. You have to communicate them honestly if you want people to recognize what those preferences are. Incorporated into that is also the mediator to try to figure out how to correlate these different preferences, how to get these preferences fulfilled in the most win-win situations possible, so that all of humanity gets built up. I'm not saying this is something set in stone. This is a hypothesis and something that is theory. But I think, regarding the Christian rebuttals, I think this is really where Christianity started anyway. We just got frozen in the process. And I think I would really prefer us to move on from that. Because the Christian morality that is being instigated right now really tightly controls individuals' behavior, says that individuals are guilty from the moment that they are born, which, is something that I didn't prefer to think, and several other people didn't prefer to think as well, that I know. And says that anybody who doesn't believe in this Christian God and believe in the sacrifice of Christ on the cross, according to most circles, is going to eternal damnation. This is not this is not something I would prefer to be in the country that I'm living in right now. It makes me extremely uncomfortable, and I think I have a right to talk and speak up about it. All right, I'll leave it at that.